Where's that wink? Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 13th episode of the Insiders on Real Estate and Marketing. I'm your host, Sandy Hibbert, and my co-host with me is Mark Miller of Secured Title of Texas. Welcome on this freezing cold Dallas day.
It's even cold in the studio.
It is cold in here.
It's cold everywhere.
I mean, it's cold everywhere. I actually, wore layered jammies last night, but it was just freezing cold upstairs.
I wore some boots yesterday, and I had my ski socks on underneath them.
There you
go. It's just
go.
wonderful.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's so good to have you here. I'm glad to be talking about what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
Trajectory of 2021. Here we are, the middle of February already. Valentine's Day coming up.
Yep.
Sunday. So much going on.
Oh, there's a lot going on.
How have you been?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Doing great. Everything's going good.
What's it like there at your new family? And
we're just,
your
it's really
team
good.
pulling together and
and we're just sort of hitting on all cylinders. Everything's flowing good. We've got a lot of diversity of business coming in, refinance, purchase side of the business, commercial, and there's a lot of land trading going on up there as well.
Yeah, I think you're going to talk about that a little bit.
Northern Collin County.
A little bit.
Yeah, so.
It's been great to meet your team, Carrie and Michelle, super people. I mean, anybody taking their business over there to Secured Title is, believe me, going to be in great hands, especially with this guy.
Well, we're on it. And I always tell people, we're not, we're the kind of size of organization where my job is not crunching numbers or worrying about margins or reporting to some home office. I'm involved in the transactions. So Carrie, myself, Andy Phillips, who's our senior escrow officer, we love the challenge, and there's a challenge about 1 out of every 4 transactions. So we're digging in. We got great underwriters, and we just got a really good system going and a local title plant for our production.
So Secured Title is small enough to do that, but big enough to where, I mean, I was looking online the other day. You guys are in Kansas and all over.
Well, yeah, there were 6 other states under the Title Midwest is our holding company.
So you've got the largeness for security and to have all the backup that you need, but yet you're grassroots enough so that people actually will get to work with you on problems.
Yeah, and that's
pretty cool.
That's the relationships that we like to have. We closed a really nice land deal this morning, and it was a new home building group. And they were there at the conference room, and I came in and got an opportunity to sit down with them and thank them for the business and talk about their future. And we've been helping them with some other contacts. They want to be buying more lots, etc. So it's really cool to just be able to interact with your clients.
It really is. And, something I think that COVID has done to all of us is it's given us a real distaste for that corporate-y, talk to a machine kind of thing. We are wanting, I think we, meaning most of the people that I talk to and work with, they want to work with real people.
Right.
They want to have that transaction where they can pick up a telephone, call the realtor or call their marketing person or call their title company, call their mortgage guy. They don't want to have to go through the red tape of larger corporations and stuff.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and so that's what that provides.
And we're open. I mean, we give people options. We talked about before, whatever they're most comfortable with. People pull up back. We go out and bring them the documentation of their car. They come in and close with us in the conference room like this morning. We'll send a notary out.
Yeah.
In fact, we got a deal that's going to be an international buyer. It's a cash deal, and we'll be doing a remote online notary from them because they don't have availability of a consulate to go to. So it's just the technology is really advancing, and in fact, we now have Microsoft Team. So we're using that internally as we're setting up our committees, and we're going putting together kind of our objectives of things we want to accomplish. Then we're doing team meetings, so you don't have to leave your office across our network. You just ramp up on Team, and everybody gets to interact and see each other, and you can post your documents up that you're reviewing. So we're embracing the technologies we can, but we want to have, I think it's kind of like high tech, high touch. We want to
I like that.
Yeah, stay in contact with our clients.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about that, so I'm glad that you're in charge of all that technology.
I direct, someone else deploys.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk about, Mark's going to share a lot about the trajectory of this market in 2021. And what I hope we're going to focus on, I think what's going to be a huge part of our conversation is how can realtors get creative in this time to find those listings,
right,
to get the listings. We need houses on the market.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the problem here. I think people are ready to buy. The mortgage market's ripe for it. The rates are low. People are ready, but there are no houses.
No, there's a ton of demand.
Yeah, it's making it crazy because with the multi-offer situation that we have, I know you're going to talk about that too. So, I mean, let's jump right into it because I want to have time to talk about some of these things, Mark, that you told me that are on your mind. And one of those things being the intense real estate transactional market.
Right.
The things that are coming up that in a normal market just aren't present so much. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I don't know, they're not as much present, but I think what you have is you have the cycle. And when we're in these cycles that we're in now, this particular cycle I'm referring to, and we've had in our prior show, is the forbearance agreements.
Oh, right.
What that eventually is going to lead to, because they're extending that into probably the third quarter, there's going to be credit duress. There's going to be things that are going to be happening related to the homeowner themselves. And so my take is, if I am in a listing conversation, rather than just talking about the marketing of the property, I really feel like the realtors need to be more forensic than they ever have been before.
You mentioned that in our last episode, but we didn't delve into that. And I want to get more into that because I think that's really key right now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of based too on the power of relationships when we're working with our clients.
Right.
To be able to feel comfortable to go, okay, we need to kind of dig deeper into this and find out what's really going on.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
That's it. Because, I mean, you can talk about everything related to selling the property and what you think your price points will be, but, how long have you owned the property, and what are your circumstances that are motivating you to want to sell the property? And if any of those things are tripped by divorce or death or credit-related issues, things of that nature, it's okay to ask the questions related to those circumstances, because documentation is going to be necessary for the title company when we finally get the contract in escrow and we're trying to go through and close the transaction. And you don't want those things to pop up in the 30 to 45 days you have to close. You want to be address those things up front. So, hey, I'm going to be out of the country, by the way. If I sell this, I may not be there. Okay, well, do you have a power of attorney? What are your options in that?
So you can do that.
You can do that, and then if they can come forth with that documentation, then what I recommend is get that to the title company, let us review it, let's make sure that the POA is good. If you're going through a divorce at whatever phase you're at, let's look and see, do you have a pre-draft divorce decree that we can review? Let's make sure it's properly setting out what are the appropriate conditions to sell the property. Things of that nature. If it's a probate or if it's a death, then let's talk about, do you have a will? Where are we on the probate side? Those type of things. Everything that helps kind of set the stage for what the real true timeline is for closing a transaction.
Are these things that are hidden inside the house? I mean, when you think of a title policy and things popping up on the title, for someone that's not an educated realtor like myself,
right,
what exactly is happening there?
Well,
and how can the regular person prevent those kinds of things from happening if you own a home?
I don't know if as much as preventative. It's more about, I believe the seller has knowledge. I've seen transactions where we thought everything was fine, and you get to the table, and I've heard of this, and you find out that there's a IRS tax lien.
Okay, that would probably be a huge thing that can happen.
And the seller did not disclose. I don't know what they're thinking exactly as to why you wouldn't disclose that, but I've seen those kind of circumstances to it.
So those are the kinds of things that come up in a title.
And that's what we'd see in the title. Once we issue the title commitment, then we're going to see what are the conditions for us to clear title and be able to convey, and what are we going to accept to that we wouldn't insure. But you can't hide the public record. And when the public record shows itself in our examination, then that's when everything kind of goes, oh my gosh, I didn't know about this, or I didn't know about that, or I didn't think that applied. So that's why I'm just encouraging in the listing process to make sure you just delve in a little bit deeper once you determine what the circumstance is for the motivation of the sale, and then drill into that.
Why are you selling your home?
Yeah, why are you selling your home? And if you don't have quite the documentation things, and they reach out to the escrow officer, let us get in contact with the seller, assuming you've accomplished the listing, and let us have a conversation with them and help them understand what we need and help them along that pathway. Survey's another thing. It's kind of common, certainly. but it's a very critical part of the conveyance side of the transaction. And what you're running into now, because of this compression of the marketplace, is a timing element. How quickly can you get an inspection? How quickly can they get the appraisal? How quickly can they get a survey produced? It's not like a snap of the finger anymore.
No,
You
it could
can have
take
one in
weeks
5 days.
sometimes.
It could take weeks up to a month. So everything has to be set in a contract in a timing to the circumstances.
So how important is that timing, and why is the timing important?
Well, the timing is critical, particularly in the very first phase of that timing, and that's the option period.
Okay.
That's the look period, and that's the period when you're going to get the inspection report done to see whether there's anything you need to negotiate additional with the seller. And in that light, I think you need to be extending, if you can, extend that option period out. Part of the other strategy on the side of low inventory and demand with multiple offers, increase the option fee, make it more relevant. The standard option fee is $100 to $200. That's not really relevant to me. But if you want to try to extend and say, give me 12 days, 14 days on the inspection, then kick your option fee up to $1,000.
Okay.
Take that. The same thing people would do, or someone representing, they would kick the earnest money up to a higher level. If you're on the buy side and you're now 5 contracts in trying to get to that house, offer to pay for the owner's title policy. Now you're reducing the seller's closing costs by doing that. So, and the seasoned realtor knows those kind of strategies to utilize. But there's just a lot more than the marketing of the property, is my point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
The title company can really be a great partner in helping you understand the timelines to get those things accomplished.
Absolutely. Given this environment, what kind of fact-finding, then, should an agent do when they're working with a buyer or a seller?
Well, the buyer is pretty well going to, the first part of that fact-finding is going to be the qualification for the financing, obviously, for that side. But and I'll use the example, if you wanted me to point that out, of this couple. I just got a contract in, and this couple went into a neighborhood that they decided they liked, and they wrote a letter. I don't know the content of the letter, but it's not unusual for, in the appeal process of contracts, for buyers, maybe they're a first-time home buyer, to write a letter about why they loved that particular house. In this case, they wrote a letter about the neighborhood, apparently, and kind of gave an overview about who they were. They're 2 young attorneys. They're the first-time home buyer, and they took these letters and stuffed them in every mailbox in that subdivision. And guess what? They got a response from one of those homeowners.
That is pretty smart.
They were able to put a deal together, and this isn't a $200,000 home. It's a $600,000 contract. It's in escrow now. We're going to be closing it.
Wow.
So that's a creativity side that's kind of like, it doesn't have to be necessarily in the pursuit of the contract to the list. How do you dig out those homeowners that haven't listed yet, that may or may not be motivated, but maybe they'll be touched in some way if somebody makes an appeal
absolutely.
to them. So that's just one element of it. It's crazy.
To me, being able to not, kind of an aside to what you'd said before on the realtors doing their fact finding, I think you've got to have a relationship. And, in my home buying experience in my life, I have had the great agents, still have the great agent. She represents me, and I've had the agents that were the elusive agent. You had to track them down to get them to do anything for you, And that agent I wouldn't have told anything to. But when I can get with my lady and she's asking me questions and I know her and she's been active in my property and getting things pulled together, she's called me, we've seen each other, I feel more comfortable sharing those personal things because buying a house is really intimate.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you want to tell hopes and dreams. You want to share your fears. You've got to share financial information.
Right.
And if you're not building a relationship with that person and with the people that you're out there representing, it's just a lose-lose situation, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's more than a transaction at the end of the day.
It is.
And that
really
relationship is the bridge toward future referrals as well. So the more they trust, the more they develop that relationship with that buyer or seller, either one, it's going to be a great referral and probably become friends on top of that. I mean, it's a really interesting cycle that real estate goes through, and how people come together by the virtue of a transaction. So I just think it's really important to understand, because those same anxieties will transfer eventually into the closing table. if they're not properly managed with
Well,
that.
that's a good point.
Because the anxieties, we're still in a very unequal process in terms of how a transaction starts and gets closed. It's fractional because you're dealing with all different types of lenders. You're dealing with all different types of service providers, and there's
Oh my
just
gosh,
not one cookie
there's so many
cutter.
working parts.
Yes. Yeah, and we're kind of we're the catcher behind home plate. We're receiving everything and guiding through, and we're the ones that finally make it all come together with the help and cooperation of everybody else.
Right.
On the other side of that, if you're dealing with people that are not good communicators, are not responsive, those type of things, then the transaction can get stalled. And the timing elements of those transactions are so critical as well. We do a key date letter when we get a contract in to send out to all parties because we want to know parties to know every timeline associated because any one of those timelines could actually possibly void the contract if you don't meet that timeline. So you don't want those options to raise their head. You want to have a process of communicating and making sure. And so from a technology standpoint, that's something we're addressing now in our closing software is some more advanced technology on how we communicate out as those action items occur so that everybody remains completely knowledgeable and communication is sort of seamless to get to the closing table.
Wow.
It's critical.
Mark, you and I have been in this business together for a long time. We've worked together since I bought Lyric Marketing in 2000.
Wow.
So 21 years.
Wow.
And so much has changed. So how have you seen when it comes to the closing table, getting to the closing table, is it better today with technology than it was, let's say, 20 years ago? Have relationship dynamics changed? Share some insight a little bit with me on what you've experienced from the past in leading the title industry and today.
Well, I think in some respects, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So the transactional process has not really changed that much. If you really look at the timelines of
A, B, C, D.
A, B, C, and D.
Still there.
Borrower, what it takes to get pre-qualified, what it takes to get underwritten and approved. None of that has compressed in any way.
Okay.
Now, we've overlaid technology in it for a communication side, but we still haven't gotten to the ultimate universe, and that is online closings and the ability to do everything remotely, so to speak, and not being using a notary, but actually having somebody logging in and you're closing online on your computer. And I know a lot of people would love to do that. Now, but on the same side of that, COVID kind of forced that side of it. But at the end of the day, back to that relational side is that people, particularly the realtors, like to be at the closing table. And I don't blame them for that. It's a great experience. It's the final
like
consummation of everything.
Yeah.
But there's not really been any real relevant advancement in terms of when they go under contract and when we close the transaction. The only thing that's happening now, just because of the compression in the market, is that those timelines are being extended. So you've got to be conscientious about what's a real timeline in today's environment to that side. But in terms of the general, now the only other thing that changes is things like conforming, non-conforming loans, and the loan amount limits have continued to rise in that respect. But the way they underwrite it, basically the same way. The way they appraise it.
It makes me happy to hear you say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
because it's the same way in marketing.
Right.
I mean, marketing from 20 years ago as opposed to today, the formula for marketing hasn't really changed.
Right.
The way we market, the vehicles that we can take, the tools we have, they have increased to the point of utter confusion sometimes in how we choose to market our business, But the idea of marketing and advertising is still the same. You got to tell your story and get it out there so people know what you're doing.
Know what you're doing.
If you don't say anything, if you don't know what you're doing, people aren't going to know about my services.
Right.
Yeah,
you still, whatever that looks like, you still have to have a drip campaign, right? You still got to be able to.
Absolutely.
And then, you and I have done this before several years back when you did your book. And we met with.
I'm working on a new revised 2021.
Cool. Yeah. So we met with 25 different people. We had we had a common theme through every single one of them. I started with this strategy, and I turned this way before this strategy was completed,
Yes.
and I started chasing this strategy. So this money that I spent over here was wasted, and I'm frustrated.
That's right.
And now I've decided that doesn't work. Well, the reason it doesn't work is you didn't deploy all the way through it.
Yeah.
And then stay with it.
Yeah.
Stay with it and adjust if you need to, but stay in that pathway and maybe pick no more than 3 channels.
That's the quote we did for you this week.
Right.
Stop chasing other squirrels
don't chase the
after squirrels.
Right.
You know, I mean, get your stuff in line. It's just the same way with getting to the closing table. You wouldn't go pinging off different inspectors.
No.
You know, you make your plan, you lock into your vendors that are doing a good job for you, and you rely on them to do a good job. You pay them money, you trust them, you rely on them, and they get the job done. Marketing, though, I think has flipped somewhat over the years because when social media came about, 2006 to 2009, realtors were starting to adopt it. All of a sudden you could think, I can market myself for free. I don't have to pay a marketing specialist. I don't have to pay for a graphic design company. I can do all this myself.
Right.
And that was the zinger. I really think that was the zinger. Not that those things are bad. I use them every day in my business. But my point is that when you think that you can take it all on yourself and not have to pay, but to just do everything yourself, you can't do it.
Well, go out on LinkedIn or go out on Facebook and watch people trying to market themselves on a video.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to stay in the content very long. People aren't going to watch very long, and they're not necessarily organized as to what their message that they're trying to send. So I think there's value in it, but I think you need to have somebody guiding you and creating a strategy like you do over a period of time, because that consistency is what begins to send a message to that side, begins to build some type of interest or relationship where somebody has a curiosity to want to move toward that particular team to work with them based on what they're telling them. And so I still believe education in any of that process, because if you say what's the one thing that hasn't really changed, it's the lack of knowledge that the general consumer has about the buying and selling process.
Yeah.
That they just don't have the knowledge.
No.
And so there's still that opportunity to educate them in that space. Rather than all of the outer parameters about the marketing side. It's more about the transactional side. Here's what you're going to experience as you go through this. Prepping them, preparing them for that, understanding and educating them along that pathway. And
that kind of hardcore marketing is so vital to me. It should be foundational to any realtor's marketing plan. Mark, you know as well as I do that you get too much involved in Instagram, Facebook. It can so easily become all about me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And before you know it, I'm just posting my pretty face and I'm not giving any content that's educating anybody.
Right.
And so then we have this vast ocean of nothingness that's just a lot of noise. And as a professional marketer, being on Facebook and Instagram 6 to 8 hours every single day, I see so much of this. I see realtors who I look at their feeds and I wonder what kind of business they're in.
Right.
I have no clue. I think they're just a pretty thing, you know. I mean, and all that's great. All that, I'm not dissing any of that. But what we've forgotten are those really basic, important things like educational brochures, educational websites, educational and foundational classes that teach people these things, and then the realtor goes out and takes that to the populace.
Well, even if you're going to do the video side of it, then bring your partners into that with you that you choose to partner with, and let their expertise come forward and interacting together in an educational 2-minute side about whether it was financing or title or survey or whatever it might be that you chose as your topic, and bring your experts in there and use that as your format for educating.
It's powerful.
It's very powerful.
It's very powerful, and I'll give you an example, and you know this because you were involved on some level with it, and that was back in when the market crashed in 2008. And my biggest client at the time was Century 21, Judge Fight Company. Great company, great guy. Jim was so savvy about the market, and he pulled his team together, brought me in, and asked us to create a campaign that could counter all of the horror stories we were getting from the media about the bottom of the market falling out of the real estate market. And in Dallas at that time, yeah, we took a big hit and it was tough, but it wasn't anything like Florida or California or New York.
Right.
And so his idea was, I've got to educate not only my realtors, because the realtors were down and out, because they weren't getting the business. They were listening to the news. They were staying at home all afraid, you know, they were going to lose all their business. And so he said, we've got to, number one, educate our realtors, and number two, encourage them to educate their clients. And if we can do this, we can change the numbers at Judge Fight Company.
Right.
And we put together the Real Estate 411 campaign. My company did that for him. And it was, real estate is great. In Dallas, it may suck everywhere else in the nation, but here in Dallas, we're doing okay. And here's why, and here's what we're doing. And I put together, I'm so proud of that campaign. It was colorful, it was old-fashioned in that it had lots of paper. You know, we could put out paper on postcards and flyers, and then we had the online part of it too that was very powerful. And that literally turned Judge Fight's numbers around that year when they were heading down because the scare of the market. So education by the leaders like you, like Secured Title, like the great brokerages that are across this city, educating, number one, the realtors as to here's what you have to do. And then number two, educating the public by the agents being engaged in that education with people.
Right.
I think we've lost that to a small degree. Social media is great, but it can't embody all of that. It takes people that have a real mind to market and to stay steady in that market with education and information.
Well, one of the key things that you pointed out with the 411 campaign is it was a campaign.
Yeah.
And
it was targeted.
It was targeted.
Yeah.
And you outlined it from starting at this month and ending at this. It was a campaign over time that continued to deliver the message and strengthen the message.
Absolutely.
And add to the message to that side. And so that's what I think sometimes people just kind of go, okay, I got to go market. And they're not thinking about what am I going to market, what am I going to talk about, how am I going to attract the listing or the buyer. And then you've just got this overwhelming flooding into the marketplace as well of inexperienced agents that are coming through these schools and lining up and they're getting in anywhere. And so I can imagine the frustration of being out there if you're seasoned, trying to market against all of that, but what you market with is your strength of your knowledge.
Right.
And your understanding and your success in selling the business, using your platform of showing what you have done historically, and then use the campaign to go into the marketplace. I think that's how you win against those that are just entering or the subpar producer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go to your
It's about
accolades.
having a strategy.
Yeah, that's it.
Have a strategy. Sit down and give some thought to what does my marketing look like. I mean, that's old school.
Yep.
We used to do that. It's so easy to just get on Instagram, get on Facebook, and just splatter stuff and think that you're doing something. But folks, right now, people aren't even seeing those. If you've got a Facebook page and you're doing posts on your Facebook page, I guarantee you, if you're not promoting it with money, a handful are seeing it.
Yeah.
So there has to be more. We have to be able, in this day and time, to market better, to ease the worries that people have about multiple contracts. If I'm a seller, what does that mean? I get 3 contracts in. Oops, or I have one and it failed. They didn't get approved. I mean, all of this stuff like you're talking about, the whole process of buying a home, realtors need to be there with that knowledge and information to ease the pain of their buyer or their seller.
Yeah.
And also rejected offers, I think, is something too that the team over at one of my clients, the Indigo Sky Group, they did a video this last week on what do you do and how do you handle a rejected offer. And it was really great. It was talking about what do you do? I got a rejected offer. Does that mean nobody wants to buy my house? And so there are these kinds of things that come up that agent who's engaged in a relationship knows how to handle those things. But that relationship also can spread deeper than just that client you're working with today to include your target audience.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, selling is an emotional experience for that homeowner as well.
Yeah.
But they also got to realize it's a transaction.
Yeah.
To that side. So you can't just carry your shoulders on your emotions on your shoulder.
Yeah.
You got to understand and you have to be realistic about what your property issues may be, or particularly after what may be revealed in inspection. You get excited, you're under contract, inspection shows $20,000 worth of needed repairs.
Yeah.
And now it's a drawback to that. You got to address it, or you're going to have to address it eventually.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can't imagine what you have to do, the psychological side of what they have to do to try to motivate that seller into understanding, either adjust your price, sell as is, or you need to do the work. But we're going to have to do something if you want your property to sell, because why isn't mine selling when I hear that the inventory is at a 1 month supply and everything's on fire and there's multiple contracts and I just only have one on that side. So there's a lot of hand-holding that has to take place.
There is.
But that also is that time to educate and be able to work with those people to let them know that the knowledge you have and trust you to go forward and do the work that's necessary in order to sell your property.
Absolutely.
So, and on the buy side, I just, I had one of our employees has been trying to buy a house.
Yep.
And every time I'd ask her, how's it going? She said, I get a call, I can't even get to my car. There's an offer on the property.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, that's crazy.
I've heard stories like that.
So they finally just conceded and said, we're in a month-to-month lease where we are right now. And so they contracted to buy a brand new home. So they're going to have a home built. Because they know that they can lock in.
Yeah.
But then the pressure of having to close in that timeline on that lot was also exerted on them for the financing side, or somebody else is going to take that lot. So, but at least it has said, at least I know if I secure the lot, I've got a home that I can build.
Yeah, that makes me feel more comfortable.
Yeah, deal with the madness out there of trying to, every time my agent turns around and says, we need to go look at this now, it's like, I got to run now.
There are options.
Yeah.
Well, we run out of time. I want to hear your 3 takeaways, though. What do you want to drive home to our viewers today?
Yeah, I'm just going to keep on this theme of that forensic side of working with clients and really understanding the next layer of the potential transaction for their circumstances. I think it just takes away so much anxiety to the table. And then the second thing, I meet with a lot of people who come in to meet with us for business, but I do take the time to say, well, tell me about your strategy.
Yeah.
And I find that there's a lot of really good people that sell in the marketplace, but they don't necessarily have the complete strategy for their marketing deployment. So, me, I refer you.
Yeah.
But because I believe in that strategy is so essential to have a long-term plan for your business.
Absolutely.
Side of it. And then just make sure that you're in good communication and have a good partner in the title side. Hopefully we might be one of those to be considered that's got a team that's available to you 7 days a week.
Yeah.
After hours, on a phone, when you're working, we're available to you.
Yeah.
To that side. So, and I would conclude with one of my favorite poems of Valentine's Day is, roses are red, violets are blue. What's your address? I have a contract for you.
I love it. I love it.
Anyhow, how about you?
Number one, market. You can't slack up, get tired, think the market's down or you're out of money, so I'm not going to do any more marketing. You can't do that. You have to keep marketing plan, a marketing strategy, a marketing initiative going all the time if you're going to stay in business. Number 2 is build relationships. Those agents that get to know their clients have a future, in my opinion.
Yep.
To have a future. So look for relationship. Don't look for numbers. It's not about quantity. It's about quality, right? So build those relationships. And And finally, something I kind of discovered through my reading and meditations this last month is pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Because our attention is finite. We only have a certain amount of it.
That's right.
So during the day, what are you paying attention to? Are you spending hours, doing this? Or doing this? Or blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So what are you paying attention to? And if you're in business, if you're in a transaction, if you're working with a client, pay attention to them. Be on, be aware, be focused, and be in the moment. I think that crosses all the lines we need it to cross.
I know.
So,
hardest thing to do is put that phone down.
It is.
Yeah.
Have a very happy Thanksgiving.
Well,
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day.
I'm thankful it's Valentine's
that's all right.
Day.
Yeah,
Have a good
it
Valentine's
is.
Day. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so
Always
much.
good to see you. All right.
See you guys next month. The Insiders on Real Estate and Marketing. Ciao.